I remember the way the sky smelled that week, when the air carried the faint trace of salt from the sea and the lilac trees trembled. As if they too sensed what was coming, I remember the way my sister laughed, the sound rippling like light through water, and how that sound became the only thing holding the walls of our little house together. We had always been two halves of the same breath-born, minutes apart hearts that once beat in rhythm when the world first opened its eyes to us. We shared everything, the quiet secrets under our blankets, the dreams scribbled on scraps of paper, the fears we never told anyone else. I never imagined a day when I would breathe without her, when I would walk through the rooms and find the echo of her voice instead of her shadow. The days before her death were strange in a way that words still cannot explain. There was a stillness in her that did not belong to her. She smiled, but the smile stayed at the edge of her lips, never reaching her eyes. She told me she was fine. She told me she just needed rest, and I believed her, because believing otherwise would have meant admitting that something sacred was breaking inside her, that the mirror of our twin souls was beginning to crack. I kept busy making tea, folding blankets, trying to keep life from slipping through the cracks of the hours, but the air had already changed. It had grown heavier, slower, filled with a quiet I could not name. The night before our birthday, she sat on the porch, wrapped in her old sweater, the one with the stitched sunflowers she loved so much, and I sat beside her without saying a word. We didn't need words. We never did. The moonlight painted her face in silver, and I saw the girl she used to be, the one who ran barefoot through the fields, the one who believed every star had a name. She looked at me and whispered something I barely heard. She said, "Promise me that you will keep living even if I stop." I wanted to laugh, to shake her and tell her not to be silly, but the way she said it froze me. I nodded, and that was the last promise I ever made to her. When morning came, I woke up to silence, too deep, too wide. Her bed was untouched, her sweater was folded at the edge, her shoes were gone, and the world had tilted into a place I did not recognize. I searched the woods, the fields, the shore, until my voice broke into the wind. And when they finally found her, the sky was weeping, a slow, gentle rain that fell like forgiveness. I don't remember falling to the ground, but I remember the sound I made. It was not a cry, not a scream, but something older than both, a sound that only a twin can make when half of herself disappears. The day of the funeral was our birthday. The irony twisted itself around my heart until I could barely breathe. People spoke in whispers, their eyes following me as if I carried a secret they could not understand. I stood by the coffin and stared at the stillness that used to be her, the same hands that once braided my hair now folded quietly, the same lips that used to call my name now silent. I wanted to tell her to wake up, to tell her that this was our day, that the world owed us laughter. Not tears, but the world did not listen. It never does. I felt everyone waiting for me to break, but I couldn't, not yet, because if I broke, I feared I would never find the pieces again. I buried my twin sister with my own hands. I wanted the earth to feel that it was me giving her back, not strangers, not time, just me. I pressed the soil gently, as if tucking her in for one last sleep. I whispered stories of our childhood, of the time we built paper boats and believed they would reach the horizon, of the time she cried when we lost our cat, and I pretended to be brave for her. I told her I would keep that promise, that I would live, even when it hurt, even when the mornings felt empty. I wanted her to hear me through the silence beneath the ground, because love does not end, it only changes shape. That night I walked home alone, the candle still burning in my hands, the wind playing with the flame, and for a moment I thought I saw her reflection beside me in the glass of the window, smiling that same shy smile she always had, and I realized that she was not gone, not completely. She was in the air, in the scent of lilacs, in the soft of the sea. She was in every breath I took, every heartbeat that stumbled between sorrow and survival, and I whispered to her that I was still here, that I would keep walking, that her promise was safe inside me. The house felt different without her. The walls seemed to lean closer, as if listening for her footsteps. Her favorite mug sat untouched, the mirror still held the shape of her face, and I found myself talking to her out loud, not out of madness, but because silence had become unbearable. I told her about the people who came to the funeral, about how they cried, about how the sun came out just before sunset, as if even the world wanted to say goodbye. I told her I missed her more than words could stretch, and I waited for the air to move the way it used to when she entered a room. In the days that followed, I learned what grief really is. It is not loud, it does not announce itself, it sits quietly. In the corners of the morning, it drinks your coffee with you, it walks beside you when you go to the market, it waits for you at night. When you think you are strong enough to sleep, it is the invisible twin you never wanted, the one that breathes your air and reminds you that love is both the gift and the wound. I began writing letters to her every night, words that would never reach her but help me breathe. I wrote about small things, the changing seasons, the way the sea moved, the color of the dawn. I wrote to remind myself that the world was still happening, that even in her absence, life did not stop. And one evening, I felt something shift. The ache softened, not because the pain was gone, but because it had found its place inside me. And I understood then that grief is not about letting go, it is about learning how to carry what cannot be returned. Sometimes I sit by her grave on our birthday and I bring 2 slices of cake, one for her, one for me. I light a candle and watch the flame flicker, and I talk to her about the year that has passed, and I feel the warmth of her laughter somewhere in the wind. I tell her that I am still keeping my promise, still walking, still breathing, still loving the world she left behind. And I know that somewhere, somehow, she is watching, smiling, proud that her other half has learned how to live with both the light and the shadow. The mornings became softer, as if the world itself was learning how to walk beside me without breaking. The light would slip through the curtains and rest on the floor in the same spot where she used to sit with her coffee, and I would feel her there, not as a shadow but as warmth. I started to talk to her less and listen more, because sometimes I could feel her answers in the small things, the flutter of the curtains, the way the clock would pause before ticking again, the faint scent of lilac that would appear in rooms where no flowers were kept. I began to understand that she was no longer somewhere else. She was woven into everything that still existed around me. Found myself visiting the sea more often. It was our place when we were younger, where we used to run and chase the tide, pretending it was alive. I would stand at the edge and let the cold water reach my feet, and I would close my eyes and imagine her beside me, laughing the way she used to, with her head tilted back and her hair caught in the wind. I spoke to the waves as if they could carry my words to wherever she had gone, and maybe they did, because sometimes the air felt lighter after I spoke. Sometimes the sound of the sea seemed to hum her name. There were still nights when the loneliness came heavy, when the walls felt too close and her absence too loud. But even then I began to notice that the pain had changed. It was still there, but it no longer crushed, it simply sat beside me. Quiet, patient, like an old friend who no longer needed to explain itself. I realized grief was not something to be conquered. It was something to be carried with grace, like a fragile photograph that time could never fade. I stopped trying to silence it, and instead, I let it teach me the language of endurance. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found her sketchbook. The one she never let anyone see. Inside the pages were drawings of moments I had forgotten, our birthdays, our childhood games, the small park near the river, and on the last page, she had drawn 2 women standing together beneath a single sun, one of them with her hand on the other's shoulder, and underneath she had written, "You are my forever." I sat there with the book in my lap, and for the first time in months, I cried, not from despair, but from something deeper, something that felt like love remembering itself. After that, I started to paint again. We had always shared that love for colors, but I had stopped the day she left. I set up the easel near the window and painted the morning sky as it changed its shade from pale gold to blue. And while the brush moved, I could almost feel her guiding my hand, as if reminding me that creation was our shared language, that through art she could still speak. I painted for hours, sometimes until the stars appeared, and in those moments I felt whole again, not because the loss was gone, but because she was there within the strokes of every color. There came a day when I visited her grave, and for the first time I did not cry. I brought sunflowers, her favorite, and I sat on the grass and told her about the new things I was learning, how I had started volunteering at the shelter, how I had met people whose eyes carried the same kind of quiet sorrow, and how somehow we helped each other by simply being there. I told her that I had begun to smile again, that the laughter no longer felt like betrayal, and that maybe this was what she wanted for me to keep moving forward, not away from her, but with her. The town had begun to change, 2 new faces, new sounds, and sometimes I would see a pair of twins walking hand in hand, and it would make my heart twist, and then ease, because I would remember that love like ours never disappears, it only shifts its shape, I would look at them and silently bless them, hoping they would hold on to each other as long as they could one evening while I was closing the windows. A song came on the radio, the same song we used to dance to when we were little, and without thinking I started to dance, my feet moving clumsy at first, but then freer, lighter, as if she was right there dancing with me in the fading light, the room filled with our laughter again. Not from memory, but from presence, and when the song ended, I whispered thank you into the quiet air. The world no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a mirror showing me that I was still alive, that I could still feel, still love, still begin again. I started writing letters not to her, but to the woman I was becoming, the one she believed I could be. I told her about the courage I found in silence, about the strength that blooms from sorrow, about how death had not ended our bond but deepened it, and I felt peace settle inside me like the slow tide. Returning home now, when our birthday comes, I still bring 2 slices of cake and I still light 2 candles, but I do not cry, I smile. I watch the flames flicker, and I whisper her name softly into the wind. I tell her that I have kept my promise, that I am still living, still seeing beauty in small things, still feeling her beside me in every sunrise and every quiet night. I know she is proud. I can feel it in the calm that wraps around me in those moments, the calm that says she never truly left in. So I keep walking, I keep breathing, I keep loving the world she once loved for both of us, and sometimes when the light hits just right, I see her reflection in the mirror, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as the part of me that survived, and I realize that this is what forever means, not endless time, but endless love. There comes a moment when silence stops, feeling empty, and begins to feel sacred, when the ache inside your chest begins to hum instead of ache, and I think that is when I finally understood what she meant on that last night when she asked me to keep living. I wake up now to the sound of birds outside the window, their wings brushing against the dawn, and I smile because she used to say that the birds are messengers between worlds, and maybe they are, because sometimes when they sing it feels like she is saying my name. I walk through the house touching the things she once touched, and each one feels like a blessing: the cup, the sweater, the old record player. Everything glows softly in the morning light, and I realize that nothing truly leaves us, it only changes how it stays. I have learned to love the quiet spaces between memories, the way the wind slips through the trees, the way the sea moves without asking why. I have learned that healing is not forgetting, it is remembering without falling apart. It is finding her voice in the wind and knowing it is not haunting, it is home. There are days when I still feel the weight of her absence like a stone in my pocket, but now I carry it with tenderness, because that weight is love, and love was never meant to be light. Sometimes I visit the cliff where we used to watch the sunset. The sky stretches wide and burning gold, and I speak to her in the open air. I tell her about the people I've met, the children who laugh when I teach them to paint, the old woman who reminds me to eat breakfast, the neighbor who leaves flowers by my door. I tell her that her favorite sunflower finally bloomed again, and that its petals turned toward the sun just like she always said they would. And I tell her that I am proud of us, proud of the way we survived together, even in separation, proud that we found a way to keep our story alive. I began to write down everything, the nights, the memories, the dreams, the moments when her presence touched my life in unseen ways, and the words became a book, not for the world, but for me, a map of where grief ends and love begins. And when I finished the last page, I took it to her grave and read it aloud. The wind lifted the pages, and I felt the air shimmer around me as if she was listening, as if she was saying, yes, you did it, you kept your promise. And I whispered, thank you for every heartbeat. We shared every breath, every moment that still echoes through my life now. Our birthday is not a day of mourning. It is a celebration of what it means to be forever bound by love. I gather my friends, I bake her favorite cake, we light 2 candles and let them burn until the wax melts into one small pool of light. We tell stories, we laugh, we cry, but it feels right because grief and joy can live together. They are sisters too, and in that glow, I always feel her near, not behind me, not above me, but within me. The same pulse that once began in our mother's womb now lives in my every step. When the night comes, I step outside and look at the stars she loved, and I imagine her among them, radiant, endless, free. I close my eyes and breathe, and in that breath she breathes too. And for a moment the line between the living and the gone disappears, and there is only love, pure and quiet, stretching beyond the Horizon ends, so this is how the story ends, not with goodbye, but with continuation. I live, she lives in me, in the laughter of strangers, in the scent of lilacs and the hum of the sea, in every sunrise that finds me still here, still keeping the promise, still loving the world for both of us.